Lace knitting. Lace knitting can go from extremely simple stitch patterns to more complicated to much more complicated. Today we're going to look at very simple lace patterns. Lace is generally created from yarn overs, a decorative increase that you already know, and decreases that accompany them so that the fabric stays straight. In this particular example, there are only two stitches other than knits and purls, and that is the knit two together right here and the yarn over. The knit two together takes away a stitch, the yarn over adds a stitch and the decorative element. Basically, it's only these 8 stitches and 4 rows that keep getting repeated for the decorative elements. So you can have a chart like this that shows the entire thing, or you can have a chart like this that shows just that part that's being repeated. What's great about this is that if you have a piece that's much wider, as long as the part that is decorative, that is inside this inner square, is a multiple of 8, you can just repeat this ad infinitum until you get to the end, and then you knit your 2 at the end, and you can make this as wide as you want. You can also repeat it as often as you like vertically, so that you can make it a long scarf using this pattern, and all you need to have with you is this little chart. Once you remember that you knit 2, follow the chart. On the way back, you knit 2, follow the chart, so you purl back, because on the wrong side a knit is a purl, and then you knit 2 after you're done all your repeats. On row 3, you knit 2, then you knit 3, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 3. Then you go back here, you knit 3, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 3, until you get to the end where you knit another 2 edge stitches. On row 4, you knit the 2 edge stitches, purl across as many times as you've done repeats, and then just knit 2 at the very end. Another way that charts are sometimes presented is without these wrong side rows. Because we know that we just knit at the edges and then purl across, and that's the same for every single row, sometimes you will see charts presented like this, where it's only the right side row, and the wrong side rows that are identical are not shown. With lace knitting, it's a little more difficult to fix mistakes. There are a couple of things that I do to help with that. One, I use stitch markers. Unfortunately, none of my pretty stitch markers fit these large needles. So I have an example of stitch markers on a needle here. This is just a round silicone ring. Those are actually my favorite stitch markers when I'm using them. A lovely decorative stitch marker and a removable stitch marker, so that if something happens I can actually remove it. It's basically just a plastic safety pin that I can open and close and put there, but I have other decorative and other removable stitch markers as well. If you don't have stitch markers that fit your needles, or if you lose your stitch markers like I sometimes do, you can just run a thread along the work in between your repeats. Stitch markers are fabulous because they can help you figure out where you are in your knitting. If, for example, I get to the end of this row and I realize I have 1 stitch too few, I can go and check. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches in this row, in this repeat, and I know I'm supposed to have 8 stitches, both from this chart, if I'm just looking at the repeat chart, and from this chart. There are supposed to be 8 stitches in each repeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here there are only 7 stitches between the stitch markers. Really, there is a stitch marker, it's just hard to see. And so I know that I've made the error here, and I can easily go back and fix it. Even if I was on the next row, because you're trying to concentrate on your pattern on this row, when you're on the back side row and you're not actually adding any stitches or you're not doing any fancy stitches, I count. And this is where I will discover easily where any errors are. So there's my first stitch marker, and I can move it back and forth on every row or every few rows. So purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I should be where my stitch marker is. 2, 4, 6, 8. I've made an error. I have made an error here as well. Well, that one was unplanned. So now I can turn around. I can go to the front. I can see that I have a knit 2 together, yarn over. I have a knit 2 together, but I don't have a yarn over here. So I know immediately that I've made an error, which is really easy to do while you are filming videos. So I go back to where that yarn over ought to be. So there's the knit 2 together, and there isn't a yarn over here. I can just pick up that yarn over and knit into it, and I don't need to go back to the previous row. I wouldn't do this more than a few times in a row, but now we're at the stitch marker, so I'm going to count back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I got to the stitch marker and I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches, and I'm supposed to have 8. So I can go back and see where my errors are. There's a knit 2 together without a yarn over. There's a knit 2 together without a yarn over. So again, I can go back and fix those. You could theoretically go back even a couple of rows above and fix them. It's obviously much easier to fix them right away. It's easier not to make the error at all. So there's my knit 2 together. So there's the yarn over that I'm supposed to pick up. I pick it up, I put it over the needle, and I purl into it. There's my knit 2 together. There's what would have been the yarn over. I pick it up and I purl into it, and I keep going. Then I knit 2 at the end. Now my pattern is looking like it's supposed to. Alright, so now I'm going to do row 9 in this case. Actually, this is going to be row 17, or if I'm looking at just my pattern repeat, I'm looking at row 3 of the pattern repeat, not of the swatch. With just the pattern repeat one, I know I have to knit 2 before I do anything, and then I start my repeat. So I knit 3, knit 2 together, yarn over, and I knit 3. Then I'm right where I'm supposed to be because I've knit 3 and I'm at the end of my repeat, so I go back to over here, I knit 3, I knit 2 together, yarn over, and I knit 3. And I should be at my next stitch marker, and there it is. And now I just, whoops, and now I just knit 2. On the way back, I can double check that I have the right number of stitches. And since I'm going to do something else to help me now, I really want to double or triple check this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Am I where my stitch marker is? And there is my stitch marker. So I am. That's excellent. And that's where I'm supposed to be. So now I do again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've come to my next stitch marker, which is on this side, so I can flip it over and then knit 2. Alright, so I know that I have the right number of stitches now. I can come and I can look to make sure that my stitches, my swatch looks like what the chart looks like. So I should have 1, 2, 3 little mountains, and I should have 3 repeats of them, and then I should have that same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I know everything is correct now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a lifeline. When you rip regular knitting, it's relatively easy to pick up the stitches. It's not so easy when you're working with lace. So I have taken a smaller piece of fairly smooth yarn, put it on a tapestry needle, and now I'm going to put it through my knitting, through the stitches that are actually on the needle. This is even easier if you're working on a circular needle, because you can push those stitches down to the cable and then you can just run these through very, very easily. It's best if you put this lifeline in after a row that's just knits and purls, like a return row on basic lace. And then I just string it through, and I can either tie it together. If I really muck up and I need to rip back, when I rip back, all of my stitches will be there and I'll be able to pick up much more easily because they'll be held by the yarn. And I will come back and show you what I mean by that. So I have merrily knit on, and I realize that I made an error. This was supposed to be a row 1 repeat, and I've done a row 2 repeat, and then I've continued knitting. Now I could have continued knitting and on, and this is really something that would be very difficult to fix. So instead of trying to fix it, I'm going to rip it out. I'm going to take my needle out, and I'm just going to rip. And I don't need to worry, because if I try ripping past where that lifeline is, the lifeline is going to hold on to my stitches for me and make sure that I don't get too far. So now what I will do is I will take a thinner needle, and I'm going to start picking up these stitches that are on the lifeline. And they're very easy to pick up because they're not going anywhere. That lifeline is holding them in place. I can pick these up, and it's just much easier with a smaller needle, though you could do it with the needle that you're actually using to knit with. So I pick them up. Now you can transfer them to the needle that you're using, or you can just work right off of this needle. And I know that everything below there was already correct because I checked that before I put in my lifeline. So now I'm going to just start knitting again. Oops. Make sure you're picking up the correct stitch. That didn't look right, so I knew something was wrong, and now I fixed that, and away I go. Knit, knit, and this time make sure you're following the correct pattern row. Knit 2 together. Make sure you're also not stitching through the lifeline. 2, knit 2 together, yarn over, one, two. Knit two together, and away you go. You can keep going, and you don't have to rip all the way out to the beginning, because sometimes with lace it's difficult to figure out what row you're on and how to pick up those stitches. This makes it very easy. Now once I know that's correct and I've done a couple of more repeats, or even one repeat, or if you're having a lot of trouble after every wrong side row, you can put in another lifeline so that you don't have to worry about it. Once you have another lifeline above this one and you know that this is correct, you can take this one out and reuse it. There we go. I hope this helps.